Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Mastering Multi-Cloud Network Strategies for Today's Hybrid Environments. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Infrastructure and Operations at Enterprise Management Associates, and Pradeep Parmar, Director of Product Marketing at Infoblox. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AIOps-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. In Pradeep's role as Director of Product Marketing at Infoblox, he focuses on core networking services, including DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. His prior experience includes leading product marketing for data and AI, networking, and collaboration products at AWS, Cisco Systems, and Symphony.com. And before I hand things over to today's featured speakers, I wanted the audience to know that Shamus and Pradeep will be wrapping up today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback, as well as 2 resources from Infoblox, so be sure to check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thanks, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And welcome to Pradeep. Thank you for joining us as well.
Hi, Shamus.
Hi. So today's presentation is based on some research that EMA recently published. It was multi-sponsor research. Infoblox was one of the sponsors. It was not custom research, but independent analyst research that was made financially possible by the support of multiple vendors in the space. It was market research that explored hybrid multi-cloud networks. The goal was to understand what kinds of technology choices they were making, architectural decisions that they're making in their hybrid cloud environments from a networking perspective, connectivity, routing, IP address space, all kinds of stuff. We asked them, what kinds of challenges they're encountering in those environments, and we were trying to identify some best practices by asking them how successful they've been with those kinds of networks and doing some cross tab analysis of their responses. It was based on a survey of 354 enterprise IT professionals who were directly involved in cloud networking at an enterprise that had both private infrastructure, like a data center on-prem or a co-location environment, at least one of those, as well as having 2 or more cloud providers. So we were trying to look at a specific type of enterprise, companies that are truly hybrid multi-cloud. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just why are these companies embracing multi-cloud? We know why companies have gone to the cloud, but why go from having a single cloud partner to using 2 or 3 or more? So we asked them first, are there technical initiatives that influence your decisions to start using a second or third cloud provider? The number one response by a narrow margin was, we are digitalizing our operational technology. That could be to, for instance, the need to have cloud services closer to an industrial edge for delivering lower latency applications, getting closer to the data that lives in those OT environments, for instance, or having more real-time direct control of operational technology by using cloud providers that are located closer to those edges. We also saw AI training and inference was a big motivator, which actually I think it kind of is similar to the drivers of OT digitization in terms of why they would be using more clouds. They need to deploy AI workloads closer to the edge where a lot of the data is that those AI workloads are training and inferring from. And then cloud first mandates, no surprise, that's driving cloud adoption in every way. And then just the embrace of DevOps and CI/CD practices had motivated the move into other clouds. When those groups are leading the charge in digital infrastructure, they tend to think less about, let's stay in one cloud for unified approach to architecture and stuff, and more like, I'm moving this kind of work into this cloud because they have the tools I need to do things this way for that project. And then we also saw business drivers. We also asked about business drivers. So multi-cloud appears to enable them to have sort of like the more flexibility and scalability in their architecture. Makes sense. I mean, that's a big driver of cloud adoption in general, but it also appears to be driving them towards multiple clouds as well. And then cost optimization, if you can pit one cloud provider against another, maybe you can get some deals, or maybe use, the type of application you're deploying will, based on your analysis, be cheaper in another environment. User experience optimization, again, closer to the edge. That's one example. And then accelerated innovation. So those are the big drivers that we saw in the research.
Yeah, and Seamus, the flexibility and the scalability benefits that 52% cited as drivers really align with what we are seeing in the field as well. Maybe I can bring that to life through an example.
Sure.
We recently worked with a global SaaS provider who was being driven by some of these forces. They had a cloud first mandate, but they hit a major roadblock during a security incident last July because they had on-premises DNS, Microsoft DNS, bundled in with directory services running on the same Windows server. And when those Windows servers were compromised during this security incident, they lost their directory services, but they also lost access to the network. And exactly at the time they needed the network to address this issue, that they lost it. So it was doubly bad for them and bringing down the entire operation offline for hours and reaching executive attention. So definitely it's a big driver. What's interesting is that 50% mentioned AI training and inference as a driver. And so these workloads are incredibly dynamic, Seamus, as you know. They spin up and down rapidly across different clouds, depending on cost and capacity and the tool sets that's available, because the pace of innovation is so rapid in this space. And one day it's this cloud provider, another day it's the other one. And so without unified IP address management and automated DNS provisioning, we see you're constantly fighting the infrastructure, instead of focusing on innovation. And so we've seen customers reduce application deployment time or application landing zone creation time from 6 to 8 weeks down to 15 to 20 minutes with proper automation. And so that's the kind of speed up that we're seeing that can turn multi-cloud from a challenge into a customer advantage.
Probably also worth noting, it just occurred to me that there is an emerging market of GPU as a service cloud providers, like startups. I talked to one a couple months ago, someone who's building networks for a GPU as a service provider that was spinning up new data centers. And that is obviously related to the AI training and inference piece. There are cloud providers that do just GPU as a service. There's several of them now. And my early research shows that enterprises that have a pretty advanced AI strategy have already got plans to place a modest number of their workloads in those environments.
Very good point. Yeah.
So why we showed you why they're multi-cloud. Let's talk about the pain of the networking pain. So only 25% of the people that we surveyed, of that 354 people that we surveyed, told us that their hybrid multi-cloud networking strategy was completely successful at this point. So that's not great. And that's actually when I ask a question like that, how successful do you feel? they're usually more optimistic than this
Mm.
on other topics like just like general network operations or how are you automating your network, things like that. Usually like 40 to 45% will say completely successful. This is bad. So we asked them first, like, what are the business challenges that are really causing you the pain right now? And I'm not surprised that the number one response is security risk, because it almost always is in any kind of disruptive environment or any sort of disruptive technology or new technology. Security risk is always like at the top of the list. And keep in mind the survey is not of cybersecurity professionals. It isn't this. These were I mean, some of them were, but most of them were like IT executives, network engineers and architects, IT architects, cloud architects. All of them are pointing towards security risk as a huge concern. And then secondarily, budget. Budget can get out of control in the cloud. You move from CapEx to OpEx, you need to plan accordingly. Networking teams don't necessarily have a lot of experience with that shift. Increasingly, they do, because a lot of network infrastructure vendors have been trying to move to a recurring revenue model by shifting a lot of the payout for actual hardware to like software licenses and stuff. But still, the shift to the cloud is really disruptive when it comes to like network infrastructure and operations. And then in terms of like shifting to top technical challenges, they're seeing some things, performance issues, no surprise there, but cloud networking product maturity. So they've adopted maybe like a multi-cloud networking solution that creates an overlay across multiple networks, or they're using networking stacks of multiple cloud providers. Like, I'm using the AWS networking stack, I'm using the Azure one, and I'm noticing certain providers not as mature around these kinds of features, and it's really causing trouble. And then just network address problems. Hybrid multi-cloud networking, you have a lot of different IP address space management tools in place for those different environments. You have a lot of DNS and DHCP sprawl. I mean, a lot, like, I talk to network engineers who have no idea what kind of DNS is in their cloud environments. One, because they can't discover it, and two, their cloud team won't give them access to what's out there. And then we found that enterprises are also finding it very difficult to mature to have sort of like a mature and cost-effective end-to-end solution for key components of their architecture. Number one, network security. Number two, IP address space. Number three, DNS services. These are fundamental components of a network architecture where they are struggling to implement these in a cost-effective way, and a way where the implementation and management of it is consistent end-to-end across the hybrid multi-cloud architecture. So these are the major pain points that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and that 25% success rate is sobering. But I look at it as this tremendous opportunity for upside, for competitive advantage. If folks in our audience can get a handle on that. So, for example, we worked with the State Department of Transportation. That kind of really illustrates these challenges. They were managing disparate systems. They in AWS, in Azure, in Google Cloud, plus on-premises Microsoft DNS. And so they had zero visibility between them, because they were literally using spreadsheets for IP address management. And you still see a lot of that, believe it or not, Shamus. And so this fragmentation creates pain points we see highlighted here. Security risks emerge when you can't maintain consistent policies across all of these environments. And, all of the cloud providers have the shared security model where they're responsible for security off the cloud, but folks in the customers themselves are responsible for security in the cloud. And we see customers struggling with having consistent security policies across all of these environments. Network addressing, like you were saying, Seamus, becomes a challenge when each platform has its own management interface and their own IP allocation methods. And performance issues, show up when you lack this unified monitoring and can't optimize traffic flows, like traffic load balancing, for example, across your hybrid infrastructure. But here's what's encouraging. We've seen organizations go from this fragmented state to a complete hybrid visibility quickly. That same state agency that I talked about, they now have a unified DDI management across the entire hybrid environment. And so the key insight from my perspective is, the 25% who are succeeding, I believe, they treat these critical network services as a unified platform, not as point solutions. And so to the extent that our audience can centralize management while maintaining the flexibility to deploy the cloud native services wherever the applications need them, I think that's one of the keys to success.
Yeah. We dove into hybrid multi-cloud IP address management space, IP address space pain points as well. Just we asked them, what are your biggest challenges around managing IP address space in this type of environment? We kind of already alluded to the challenges around address management as being like a top 3 issue, but here is sort of a deep dive into what's behind that number. Security and compliance risk is number 1. So like they're struggling around things like role-based access control around who can do what in the IP address space. They're with siloed tools, they don't have good centralized logging and audits of who did what with IP address management. There's a lot of risk that they're opening up to there. There's also the issue of multi-vendor complexity, which both Pradeep and I have already kind of alluded to. Like you have different approaches to managing it across the cloud providers that you're working with. And that also leads to a lack of centralized IP policy management, complexity around IP address planning and allocation, address exhaustion or subnetting complexity leading to scalability issues. There's a lot going on. Only 4.5% of the people that we asked this question of said that they couldn't think of anything. So 95% are experiencing at least some kind of pain with IP address management in these cloud environments.
Yeah, and that top pain point really jumps out, the 42.7%. It's like security and compliance from lack of, role-based access control and audits. And so this isn't just an operational headache, it's a business risk, right?
Yeah.
We worked, for example, with a large tech company where the cloud teams were creating subnets and assigning IP addresses without first kind of bringing the central network team into the loop. And so everything seemed fine when these the cloud environment and the on-premises network environment were isolated. But the moment someone tried to connect them because they needed those to communicate with each other, they had IP address conflicts. And that's when they had applications going down.
Yeah.
The multi-vendor complexity at almost 35% is also equally telling. When you're managing IP space through 4 or 5 different interfaces, like maybe you have 3 public cloud providers, maybe you have something on premises, and you could have millions of these IP addresses, and they're dynamic, right? It's not like you assign it to somebody and it just stays with that device or resource forever and ever. Sure, you have some that stay, but mostly they're dynamic. So it becomes a non-trivial effort to go manage them. And so when you're using 5 different tools or interfaces, tend to get some errors. And we've seen customers literally paying for IP addresses they can't even track. And so here's the opportunity, though. Organizations that implement a universal IP address management system, they can start to see immediate benefits. And so this same tech company that I talked about now has centralized visibility that helps them eliminate these IP address conflicts and helps prevent outages.
We also dove into the DNS piece of this, like what are your multi-cloud DNS pain points? Again, security risk. They see like architectural gaps in how they establish a secure DNS infrastructure. They have a lack of visibility because they can't necessarily monitor DNS queries and get logs consistently from all the different types of DNS services that are being implemented across these environments. Because there's a lack of centralized control in a lot of enterprises. The network architecture, network engineering team that has an established process for establishing a secure DNS architecture doesn't have 100% control of the hybrid multi-cloud DNS environment. Like they can, they have control in some, if not most, of the on-prem environment. But when it comes to like the hyperscale environments, less control, less input into how those architectures are designed. They're also seeing performance issues, which kind of is connected to what I just described. Like they aren't able to ensure that the DNS implementation is optimized to minimize things like latency and delays in resolutions of queries and things like that. And they're dealing with scalability issues. Cloud resources grow too quickly. They can't scale up DNS to meet it. And again, inconsistent features and capabilities across multi-vendor DNS is an issue. You using 4, 5, 6, 7 different DNS services in an architecture, you aren't necessarily going to have consistent capabilities across them, which makes it really hard to have a consistent approach to design and management. So, and again, only 4.5% claimed to have no pain points whatsoever. So everyone's feeling some kind of pressure here to improve.
Yeah, that 4.5% must be like best in class and kind of awesome unicorns. So the 44.6% reporting security risks from architectural gaps is really interesting. It really points to the fact that DNS is critical infrastructure. That's often one of the most fragmented service in hybrid multi-cloud environments. And so that's likely contributing to the pain that the customers are seeing in terms of security. The scalability issues at 31%, capture a challenge we saw with a global engineering and tech firm. They were managing DNS manually because they had appliances deployed across several Azure regions as well as on-premises as part of their traditional infrastructure. And as the cloud footprint expanded, they had 150 production sites. And so they were expanding their cloud footprint to these more than 180 production sites. And this fragmented DNS approach, like you were saying, Shamus, was not scaling to keep up with that growth. The DNS was not scaling. They just didn't have the resources to keep managing it site by site. And so they needed a more flexible and scalable solution that didn't depend on deploying or maintaining appliances in this very distributed environment. And so their solution was a cloud-native, infrastructure-free NIOS X as a service offering that we have that scales automatically because it doesn't require organizations to deploy something physical, any infrastructure. It's just a cloud-native service, infrastructure-free or serverless, if you will. So now they have centralized visibility and they can use that NIOS X as a service deployment to drive consistent policies across all of the DNS services, both on premises and in the cloud. And with Terraform-based automation, they also able to speed up the provisioning across the environments. And so the key learning from where I sit is when organizations move from like a hardware or appliance dependent DNS to something that's cloud native delivery, they eliminate infrastructure bottlenecks. They get elastic scalability that can scale better with what the business needs rather than scaling at the speed of procurement. So I thought that was an interesting deployment.
Yeah. So we've talked about why people are going multi-cloud, what pain they experience in the networking world when they are multi-cloud. Let's talk about best practices for multi-cloud networking. And so this is based on just zooming in on that 25% of people who told us that they were feeling really good about their approach to hybrid multi-cloud networking? Like, what were they doing differently that maybe you, as an attendee, could take as a lesson? First, partnerships with cloud teams, essential. So, the evolution of the IT organization has been that a lot of early cloud adoption was not driven by IT. The CIO organization, the CISO organization didn't really have much control or insight into what was happening. There's been a gradual shift as enterprise IT organizations have established more control and created more integration and collaboration with that sort of cloud group that has grown up maybe organically over the last decade or so, decade plus. Only 37% of the enterprises in our survey told us that the networking team was very good at collaborating with the cloud team. I still talk to network engineers and architects who are not on the same page with these people. Sometimes it's their choice not to be. Other times it is out of their hands. The cloud team views something like network engineering as an impediment, as a danger. Like, oh, if we let these network engineers into our environment, they're going to break things. They're going to change things in a way that we don't understand. We don't want them in here. And that's no way to live. The people who told us that they were very good at collaborating with the cloud team were 5 times more likely to report complete success with cloud networking. So they've built those bridges, and those bridges are working. Where are they working together? Security policy management, number one. I mean, the network team is not necessarily the cybersecurity lead, but they are collaborating with the cloud team on security policy management. When I talk to network engineers and architects who are taking some control in the cloud, what they're doing is they're getting together with cybersecurity and building guardrails, saying these are the policies that we are establishing for the cloud team to work within. Integration and automation. Let's integrate network automation with your cloud orchestration, please, cloud team. Let's integrate your observability with our observability. Security incident response and troubleshooting network problems, and simple infrastructure implementation. Those are the things that they're prioritizing.
Yeah, I mean, this partnership challenge is critical, and that 5x multiplier is just an awesome opportunity for excellent collaborators, because and we see this in our client engagement as well. For example, a large car rental company who's an Infoblox customer, they even have an internal initiative. They call it Busting the Silos. That's the name of the initiative. So we definitely see that. We worked with another financial firm called MYOB out of Australia, New Zealand, where the network and the cloud teams were operating in silos as the company was migrating workloads to the cloud. So every time the cloud ops, or the DevOps team in the cloud environments needed to get IP addresses for their workloads, they would raise tickets and to get the next block of IP addresses. And sometimes the tickets would get addressed in hours, but sometimes it might take days for the network guys to get to it, right? And so what they did, this kind of illustrates the integration, the automation thing that you saw, Shamus, in your survey. So what they did is they collaborated to develop an infrastructure as code workflow. So now the cloud teams get the next available IP addresses within minutes for their projects without having to raise tickets. So they used a Terraform-based automation to implement that automation workflow. And so the one takeaway for our audience is, consider not to try to force teams to change their workflows. Give them something that kind of bridges the different worlds, right? So while maintaining the capabilities that each team needs. So for example, we have this Infoblox portal, which is a centralized portal that can manage across your on-premises as well as your multi-cloud environments. And so the cloud teams can continue using the cloud native DNS services that they love, whether it's Amazon Route 53 or Azure DNS or Google Cloud DNS. But the NetOps team can use the Infoblox portal to manage those DNS services, right? So you can read, write, and even write back into them. So tools like that kind of help bridge this, help promote this collaboration, so that folks can continue using the tools they're using, but finding a common tool that both of them can use for their workflows.
All right, number 2, best practice, get rid of that siloed fragmentation, those cloud silos around your networks. Centralized management of network security, IPAM, and DNS. Those are places to get started. So we ask, to what extent is it a priority for you to manage each of the following in a centralized and unified manner across all your cloud providers, cloud regions, and data centers? And you see they're making it a high priority to centralize and unify network security policies and controls, IP address space management, and DNS services. Organizations that are making this a high priority were more likely to tell us they're doing well. Those who are not making a priority were in a bad place. So it seems pretty obvious to me that this is something you should be doing, but it's not easy because one, maybe the vendors you work with aren't enabling it. 2, like there's a lot of people problems involved behind this, which the previous slide kind of alluded to, but that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, totally. So the network security policy makes perfect sense when you consider the fact that DNS is involved in 80 to 90% of cyber attacks. That's what the data shows us. And so when organizations implement a unified DDI platforms, they can enforce consistent security policies across all environments, from on-premises to multi-cloud environments, because they can get centralized visibility into that environment, and that helps them identify and block threats before they reach critical systems. Because if you can't even see, how can you go manage it, right? And so that's where the unified DDI platforms really help the audience. The 66.1% prioritizing IP address space centralization also reflects a real business need. Consider an organization with distributed offices, but limited visibility into IP utilization across cloud environments. And we've had customers tell us in some of the cloud environments, their IP address utilization is less than 10%. And that falls to less than fraction of a percent in Kubernetes or container environments. And so without centralized IPAM, IP address management, they can't really scale efficiently, because they don't know what they have or where the gaps exist. And so we had one large oil and gas company. They used to experience about 50 outages per year. They had a Windows server farm of about 400 servers globally running DNS, DHCP. And every time they would do Patch Tuesday, once a month patch updates, they would get at least 1% failure rates. And when they moved to a centralized Infoblox DDI, they eliminated these outages entirely, because they're able to see across this distributed environment of this through a centralized interface, and also they're able to decouple a critical service like DNS, DHCP from a directory service, from deploying both of those critical services on the same Windows server, which is a big no-no, even from organizations like NIST that now recommend that you should think about decoupling these critical services, not deploying them on the same physical or virtual infrastructure.
The third best practice we wanted to highlight is the concept of a cloud networking source of truth. This network source of truth is a very hot topic in the network engineering world, mostly coming from people who are focused on network automation. And it's usually a focus of like the on-prem network, like how am I maintaining a source of truth about my data center switching? How am I maintaining a source of truth about my campus network? But it's equally important in the cloud. What is a source of truth? To those who've never heard of it, it's a repository of network data gathered from authoritative systems of record about your network, like IP address space, config, policy, design standards. It enables network operations because it simplifies and hopefully automates the process of gathering the data that operators need to do certain tasks, whether it is moves, adds, and changes, provisioning new networks, troubleshooting an issue, investigating a security incident. The gathering of data about how your network should be behaving, what the intended state of the network is, and what the actual state of the network is often complex and difficult to automate, and fragmented. So having a centralized, comprehensive approach to this is really useful. Only 27% of the people in the survey told us that they had a comprehensive network source of truth, something that was, referencing systems of record, presenting it to you in a way that you could find it quickly. Pretty rare. But those people who told us that they had a comprehensive approach to this were reporting, more cloud networking success. We asked them what systems are involved in such an environment. It's IPAM, IP address management. It's data center infrastructure management, even though we're talking about the cloud here, it's hybrid multi-cloud. DCIM usually often has some IP address space information in it, but also has like inventory information in it. It can have cloud network inventory information in it. Network controllers, like you got a multi-cloud networking solution, that controller's got a lot of data in it that you can pull. SD-WAN as well is often involved in multi-cloud. CMDB, your configuration management database. Most networking engineers aren't happy with the quality of their CMDB, but it is very valuable for this. And then what are the benefits? They told us specifically they have benefits that come from establishing at least a moderately effective source of truth about their cloud network. It is improved data quality, which obviously, based on how I described it, it makes sense. Improved visibility into the network. You can find what you need to know about the network quickly. It reduces security risk because you have good data that can in visibility. It can tell you where your gaps are in your policies, where your violations are, for instance. And it streamlines automation. The data you need to make an automated change at scale is readily available in a decent network source of truth.
Yeah, and from where I sit in the network world, I think if you can use an ubiquitous and foundational technology like DNS or DHCP to start to build a picture of what's on the network or what are the resources that you have, and devices as well as just cloud resources, then you are getting economies of scope because you are going to do DNS DHCP anyways, because when you use DHCP to send out that IP address, for example, with our systems, we just don't send out the IP address and keep track of it. We actually help you build an IP address management database we'll fingerprint the devices or the cloud resources and build that into a database. So for example, we worked with a large wholesale distributor that was having significant growth after COVID, during COVID. But they were managing network data such as IP addresses through spreadsheets. And this led to duplicate IPs and confusion about asset locations and longer troubleshooting times. And with our solution, they are able to automatically discover assets across cloud and on premises. And that has helped them build a very resilient foundation. And to them, this network source of truth isn't just about the data. Like you were saying, it's about transforming the data, Shamus, into actionable intelligence, things you can do with it. Like you said, you can drive automation with it properly. You can drive better security policies with it. So those are the kind of things that we are seeing in our customer base.
Cool. Great. Final best practice that we're highlighting here is integrating branch to cloud connectivity into multi-cloud architecture. So don't neglect the edge of your network. 10 years ago, all your cloud related traffic, like user to cloud traffic, was probably being routed through your data center. Today's architecture is more distributed, more complex. That sort of hub and spoke approach to cloud access is less and less realistic. And we're seeing that in the data. 31% of the enterprises in the survey considered software-defined WAN or its evolutions, Secure Access Service Edge, which is implied by that, as an essential multi-cloud networking solution. It was especially important as enterprises told us they had more cloud providers, like those that are using 3 or 4 cloud providers, like we're more likely than the 31% to say that SD-WAN is essential multi-cloud networking provider, because it allows them to sort of handle that cloud on-ramp control to allow distributed access to the best cloud environment for that region or that group of users or that business unit or whatever. It's also playing out in how they ensure quality of experience. 56% of the enterprises in the survey said they're using some kind of network overlay solution, like an SD-WAN solution or a multi-cloud networking solution, to enable optimal routing of traffic from the enterprise edge into different regions and different cloud providers. And finally, 35% said that when thinking about the observability piece of hybrid multi-cloud network operations, reporting and insight into site, like corporate site to cloud connectivity, was essential. It's not just about being able to understand like your data center to cloud connection. It's not about just looking at interconnects between your regions or between your cloud providers. It is also about how user traffic is reaching the best cloud environment and what that experience is like for those users. So it's very clear that hybrid multi-cloud networking is actually more than just the hybrid multi-cloud application digital architecture. It is the entire enterprise at this point.
Yeah, totally. Like the 31%, like you said, Shamus, viewing SD-WANs as essential really shows that organizations are thinking about the complete network fabric, not just the cloud connectivity in isolation. And so one example from our perspective of this is Google Cloud's recently announced Cloud WAN solution. And this was announced in April at Google Next. And our universal DDI solution integrates seamlessly with these modern networking architectures, giving organizations consistent DNS and IP management across the entire fabric where the cloud WAN goes, right? Going from branch offices through SD-WANs to multiple cloud environments. And so really excited about that solution.
So payoff, we just wanted to show you the benefits that the enterprises in the survey were experiencing, when they are successful to whatever extent they can be with managing their hybrid multi-cloud networks. So most of them said that they're seeing operational efficiency. Secondarily, they're seeing opportunities to optimize costs, like they, just from optimizing and managing things effectively at the networking layer, they can identify ways to optimize costs, maybe by like reducing charges incurred by moving data in and out of clouds, by identifying underutilized resources. And then they also reported secondarily risk reduction around security and compliance, and then tertiary opportunity around accelerating overall innovation in the business and improving servers resiliency. Those are other opportunities that they spotted. So there's a lot of opportunities to help you as a networking team, an IT organization, but also a business when you can pull off an effective hybrid multi-cloud network.
Yeah, and so from what we are seeing, the operational efficiency and the cost optimization, these are benefits that often surprise customers on how quickly they can materialize. So that oil and gas firm that I saying that had 400 Windows servers globally, they ended up saving more than $1 million per year in OpEx by moving from a hardware-based DNS system deployed on Windows servers to a cloud-based Infoblox solution. And security and compliance risk reduction reflects something critical. When your network services are unified and automated, you get rid of these human errors that cause many of these security incidents. So that global SaaS provider that I talked about, they avoided future outages like their July incident by moving away from on-premises DNS DHCP deployed on Windows servers to our cloud-based universal DDI solution. And so when network infrastructure becomes an enabler instead of a bottleneck, you can get to development teams focusing more on the applications instead of kind of fighting the infrastructure fight.
Right. So key takeaways, AI, IoT, or operational technology, and cloud-first strategies are the big drivers of multi-cloud right now. You may have others that you think are more important. That's fine. Every enterprise is different. Most cloud networking strategies are struggling, faltering. They're dealing with security risk, budget issues, problems with address management, cloud networking technology maturity, performance problems, you name it. Like there's a lot of things that are going on, but there is a plan for improving things. Like start by building a partnership with the cloud team so that you are not acting in isolation, working in isolation. Get on the same page with them, get a seat at the table, show them what you can do. Show them the power of centralizing management of things like network security, IPAM, and DNS. Show them how you can get a source of truth about the cloud network that enables like more efficient, more effective operations, better intelligence about what's happening in the cloud. With a good network source of truth, like you can do things like cost optimization, and ensure site-to-cloud connectivity is optimal because it's about the entire enterprise now. It's not just about your cloud environment where your applications and data lives. It is the experience of the end user as they are accessing services from everywhere, not just from central point in the enterprise. So with that, we got some time for questions, but also here's some resources from Infoblox. I don't know, Pradeep, do you want to talk through any of this at all, or do you want to just jump into Q&A?
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, 30 seconds, a couple of resources. Feel free to download them and also look in your inbox for these resources. Working with the EMA team, you'll find how real-world examples, for example, in the first one, how some of our customers drove some of these benefits. And the second one, I really like the 9 pitfalls of not having enterprise-grade DDI. There's a quick high-level view of things you need to be aware of so that you leverage other people's learnings so you don't fall into these pitfalls.
Thank you,
Great.
Pradeep. And I also included the links in the chat, so check that out. And I will also include the links in the follow-up email. Now, diving into the questions, starting with you, Pradeep, you mentioned a customer reduced application landing zone creation from 6 to 8 weeks to 15 minutes. What specific automation capabilities made that possible?
Oh, very good question. So the key was unified management, unified IP address management, combined with automated DNS provisioning. So they used our Terraform integration to automate all of this. So instead of doing it manually across multiple regions and multiple availability zones, doing it manually across 3 different environments, whether it's development, QA, or production. That's what was causing 6 to 8 weeks. They automated all of that with the Terraform and able to get down to from 6 to 8 weeks to 15 minutes.
That's great. Thank you, Pradeep. Shamus, jumping over to you. Only 25% are succeeding with cloud networks. Could you tell what the people who failed are doing wrong?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some of it is just the inverse of some of the best practices that we highlighted. Like they don't have good collaboration with the cloud team. They don't, instead of making it a high priority to centralize things like network security, DNS, IP address space management, they make it just a secondary priority or not a priority at all. They also told us that like they're very budget constrained. That's a big issue. They have problems with implementing security policies and controls, specifically on the connectivity between the enterprise network and the cloud network. So you think that might be, for instance, between the direct connections between the data center and the cloud, but it could also mean the enterprise edge. Like perhaps they don't have a good solution for securing connectivity for that traffic going from branch offices and corporate sites into the cloud. So that's driving up security risk. They also and they also told us that instead of having sort of like a well integrated cloud networking source of truth, their source of truth in the cloud network was more of like lots of siloed tools and repositories that required a lot of manual like collection of data, correlation of data, analysis of data to understand things. So that whole thing was much more immature and not as effective. So that was holding them back.
Great, thank you. Let's take one more question, Pradeep, wrapping up with you. For organizations just starting their multi-cloud journey, what's the biggest mistake you see them make with DDI management?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that we see is them treating each cloud platform as a separate network silo. So they'll use AWS native tools for AWS, Azure's for Azure, and so on, right? And this creates fragmentation that leads to IP address conflicts, security gaps, and that 75% failure rate that Shamus talked about, right? Only 25% are being successful. So our recommendation is, continue using the cloud native tools, but start with the centralized DDI management offering from day one. It's much easier than trying to unify things later.
Great advice. Thank you, Pradeep, and thank you, Shamus, for taking those questions. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's webinar, so be sure to check that email out. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope we'll see you at a future EMA webinar.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.